Tonight, the Justice Department is pointing the finger directly at Vladimir Putin for again attempting to interfere in U.S. elections. According to a new indictment, this time, the Kremlin's influence operation allegedly included funneling money and propaganda directly into the hands of some of the most prominent voices in right-wing media. CNN has confirmed tonight that the nearly $10 million went to Tenet Media, and among the commentators there are podcasters you might be familiar with, Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. Both of them have millions of subscribers on YouTube and other social media platforms. And in fact, some of the same narratives that the Kremlin was pushing came up when Pool interviewed Donald Trump just in May.
It's kind of scary to think about, but you take a look at the weakness we have now with Ukraine and the money that we are wasting.
When you look at Ukraine, we're giving all of this money. Europe, which is much more affected by that war than us, is spending just a tiny fraction of what we're spending. And you say, does anybody at least get involved in this? But more importantly, I will end that war. I'll get it ended. Putin respects me.
I should note, Johnson and Pool both say tonight that they maintained control of their content and say that they were victims of the alleged scheme. My next guest met face-to-face with Putin on this very issue back in 2018, where he delivered this message.
It's a lesson, I think, don't mess with American elections.
At the time, Ambassador John Bolton was Donald Trump's national security advisor. Ambassador Bolton, it's great to have you because, you know, when you look at this indictment and the part about this and the money that they were allegedly funneling to this Nashville, this Tennessee-based media group, in 2016, it was a troll farm posing as Americans and grassroots activists. What do you make of the allegations in this indictment that the Kremlin is now trying to use actual American influencers, whether it was to their knowledge or not?
Well, it's not at all surprising. If anything surprising is that they weren't doing it earlier. If you go back just a little bit in history, the 1940s and the 1950s, the communist Soviet Union realized that Hollywood had a big influence on American opinion. So taking control of the studios, getting their kinds of actors and scriptwriters in was a major communist effort to infiltrate Hollywood. And, a few people stood up to it, like Ronald Reagan, the union man, head of the Screen Actors Guild, to push that back. So this idea of influencing influencers from Russia, it's in their playbook, and I'm not at all surprised they're doing it in this election and probably others that we haven't uncovered yet.
Well, and maybe some people watching are not familiar with people like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, but they do have millions of subscribers on YouTube, on social media platforms. Obviously, you just saw that one of them interviewed Donald Trump in May. Republicans, lawmakers go and speak to them or quote them on Twitter and whatnot. It made us think about what the Republican Intelligence Chair, Mike Turner, Republican House Intel Chair, Mike Turner had to say back in April about this.
We see directly coming from Russia attempts to mask communications that are anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia messages, some of which we even hear being uttered on the House floor.
I mean, how successful do you believe Russia has been in influencing Republicans on issues like Ukraine?
Well, again, to go back into Russian history, Vladimir Lenin used to call people like that useful idiots. And there are a few useful idiots in Congress today on the Republican side. And I'm sure the Russians are trying to take advantage of them. It's really a twofer for Russians or others trying this kind of influencing. One, I think they do want Donald Trump to be president because unlike Trump's opinion of his relationship with Putin, Putin thinks Trump is an easy mark, so he'd be happy to deal with him. But it has a secondary and perhaps even more significant effect because this kind of propaganda undercuts Americans' faith in their own institutions, and it turns Americans against each other. People who hate Donald Trump will now say, more Russian interference. We knew it was true all along. Diehard Trump supporters will say they've politicized the Justice Department again. Here's another prosecution of poor people just trying to help Donald Trump out. Yeah. So this sowing of discontent, distrust is very significant.
Yeah, and you see people who now doubt, what we read in an indictment like today. I got to ask you about something else, because back in April, you were sitting here with me on this show. You told me that you were writing in Dick Cheney for the election. You're not voting for your former boss, Donald Trump. You heard Liz Cheney say today that she's voting for Harris despite being conservative. And she said it is important for people to recognize not only is what I've said about the danger that Trump poses something that should prevent people from voting for him, but I don't believe we have the luxury of writing in candidates' names. Does that change your opinion at all?
Certainly not. I was coming under pressure not to vote for Dick Cheney, to vote for Liz, but I guess with her comments today, maybe I'll just stick with Dick Cheney. It's not a luxury to be able to write in somebody other than the two major party candidates. It's important. It's a protest vote. I understand my vote will not elect a president. It has no chance to. But in Maryland, where I live, I have no chance to affect the Electoral College outcome there anyway. And I am not going to vote for anybody with whom I have a principled disagreement or think they're not fit to be president. It's a sad commentary on our political process that we've got two such inadequate candidates now. And I don't agree with the idea that somehow the Constitution is such a piece of weak paper that Donald Trump is a threat to it. Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage if he's elected in a second term. He is not an existential threat to American democracy. If you really think that, you must think this country isn't worth much, because we've gone 235 years with this Constitution. We've survived a lot worse than Donald Trump. And this kind of comment undercuts those who are trying to see Trump put in his place.
And of course, there are certainly people who feel that way. Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.